Daniel Brooks and Melissa Brooks looked like the kind of couple no one ever questioned. They shared a quiet home, steady routines, and a life that blended perfectly into a peaceful Canadian neighborhood. To the outside world, they were invisible in the safest way possible. But beneath that calm surface, every choice they made was pulling them closer to a carefully planned deception. What began as a private struggle soon became a calculated crime, and long before anyone noticed, their ordinary life was already collapsing under the weight of a secret that would end with handcuffs, a courtroom, and 7.5 years behind bars. From the outside, the couple appeared to be living a calm and respectable life in a quiet Canadian neighborhood. Their house looked neat, their lawn was always trimmed, and nothing about their routine drew attention. They left for work at the same time every morning and returned before dark. On weekends, they kept their curtains closed and avoided social gatherings. To the people around them, they were simply private and disciplined, the kind of couple that preferred silence over small talk. Both had steady jobs that seemed secure. The husband worked long hours and rarely took days off, while the wife managed her responsibilities with careful precision. They paid their bills on time, attended required appointments, and followed the rules that society expected from them. There were no visible signs of conflict or chaos. No police visits. No public arguments. Their life appeared balanced and controlled. What could not be seen was the weight they carried inside the house. The cost of living kept rising, and their income stayed the same. Small debts slowly turned into larger ones. Credit cards became a temporary escape, and loans filled the gaps they could no longer manage. Each month brought new stress, even though they tried to hide it behind calm faces and normal routines. They stopped planning for the future and focused only on surviving the present. Nights were often spent in quiet tension, staring at screens, reviewing numbers, and calculating what they could delay paying next. The pressure was constant, but they refused to ask for help. Admitting failure felt worse than struggling in silence. Over time, fear replaced hope. They worried about losing their home, their status, and the life they had built. The idea of starting over felt impossible. This fear slowly changed how they thought. Rules that once mattered began to feel optional. Boundaries became flexible. As the pressure continued to build, the couple began searching for ways to escape their financial collapse without drawing attention. At first, they explored legal solutions, hoping for quick approvals or hidden programs that could offer relief. They filled out forms, reviewed policies, and spent hours reading terms they barely understood. Each attempt ended the same way, with delays, rejections, or requirements they could not meet. Time was moving faster than their options. Slowly, their focus shifted from solving the problem honestly to bending the rules. They started noticing how systems relied heavily on trust and paperwork rather than direct verification. Small gaps stood out, especially in processes that assumed people would act in good faith. What once seemed like harmless observations soon turned into deliberate study. They tracked deadlines, eligibility rules, and approval patterns, learning how decisions were made behind the scenes. The husband handled the technical side, analyzing numbers, timelines, and requirements. He mapped out scenarios where details could be adjusted without triggering immediate alarms. The wife focused on organization, keeping records, documents, and reminders in order. Together, they worked quietly and carefully, treating the process like a project that had to be executed perfectly. At first, they told themselves it was temporary. They believed they would fix things later, repay what they took, and return to normal life. This belief made the idea easier to accept. It helped them sleep at night and ignore the growing sense of unease. Every small step made the next one feel less dangerous. Preparation became routine. They tested minor changes, watching closely for reactions. When nothing happened, their confidence grew. Fear turned into control, and control turned into boldness. By the time the final plan formed, it no longer felt like a crime to them. It felt like a solution. The moment they moved forward with the plan felt calm on the surface, but underneath it carried enormous risk. Everything had been calculated down to the smallest detail. The timing was chosen carefully to avoid attention, and each action followed the sequence they had practiced repeatedly. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was left to chance. The goal was to make the event blend into normal activity, appearing no different from hundreds of similar cases processed every day. Once it was done, there was no immediate reaction. No warning signs appeared. Days passed without interruption, and that silence felt like confirmation. The systems they had studied responded exactly as expected. Processes moved forward smoothly, and approvals arrived without challenge. The couple continued their daily routine, going to work, buying groceries, and maintaining their quiet lifestyle. To anyone watching, nothing had changed. Relief slowly replaced fear. The tension that once filled their home eased, and the constant worry about overdue payments faded. Bills were settled, and the threat of losing everything seemed to disappear. The success of the plan gave them a sense of security they had not felt in months. It also gave them something far more dangerous: confidence. They began to believe they were invisible. The absence of witnesses and the lack of immediate consequences made the act feel distant, almost unreal. What they failed to understand was that detection does not always happen instantly. Systems designed to protect trust often move slowly, relying on patterns rather than sudden alerts. Unnoticed at first, a minor inconsistency had already been recorded. It was small enough to be ignored initially, but significant enough to remain flagged. While the couple enjoyed their temporary relief, data was quietly stored, waiting to be reviewed. The crime had left no obvious trace, but it had created a shadow, and that shadow would eventually lead back to them. The first sign of trouble did not arrive as a confrontation or a warning. It came quietly, buried inside routine procedures meant to catch rare errors. A scheduled review brought older records back into focus, placing past activity side by side with new information. When compared closely, one detail did not align the way it should have. It was not serious enough to raise alarms, but it was unusual enough to pause the process. The file was marked for closer examination and passed along without urgency. At this stage, no names were attached to suspicion, only data points that felt slightly out of place. Investigators were trained to remain patient, knowing that real problems often reveal themselves slowly. They began checking related records, expanding the review without alerting anyone involved. As more information was gathered, patterns started to emerge. Timelines overlapped in ways that seemed unlikely to be coincidence. Transactions followed similar structures, repeating just often enough to suggest planning rather than chance. Each finding added weight to the concern, even though no single detail could prove wrongdoing on its own. The couple remained unaware of the growing attention. Their lives continued as usual, and the silence reassured them. Meanwhile, analysts reconstructed events step by step, tracing movements and decisions across months. Small inconsistencies became connected threads, and those threads began forming a clear direction. What started as a routine check was now a focused inquiry. The review team expanded, bringing in specialists who understood how deliberate manipulation could hide behind ordinary behavior. Still, everything moved quietly. There were no visits, no calls, and no visible signs of investigation. By the time suspicion finally settled on a specific source, the groundwork was already complete. The case no longer depended on guesses or assumptions. It was built on confirmed patterns, and all of them pointed back to the same. As the investigation deepened, attention shifted from isolated records to the people connected to them. Every document, transaction, and digital trace was examined in context. What once looked like unrelated activity now appeared linked through timing and structure. The focus narrowed, and the couple's names quietly entered the investigation without their knowledge. Financial histories were laid out in detail, revealing changes that did not match their reported circumstances. Increases appeared where stability was expected. Adjustments were made too precisely to be accidental. Investigators compared these shifts against application dates and system responses, uncovering coordination that could not be explained by coincidence. Digital activity added another layer. Login times, device identifiers, and submission methods showed consistent patterns. Actions taken from different places shared the same digital fingerprint. This confirmed that decisions were being made together rather than independently. The evidence suggested planning, not confusion or error. Background checks revealed more subtle details. Both individuals had roles that gave them familiarity with structured processes and documentation. This knowledge explained how the manipulation remained hidden for so long. It also eliminated the possibility that they misunderstood the system. The behavior showed awareness and intent. At this stage, the investigation became formal. A timeline was constructed from the earliest preparation to the most recent outcome. Each step fit neatly into place, leaving little room for doubt. Still, authorities waited. Acting too early could weaken the case. Surveillance and monitoring continued in silence. The couple's routine was observed, not for drama, but to confirm consistency. Everything they did matched the patterns already discovered. Their normal behavior no longer looked harmless. It looked controlled. The arrest did not come with chaos or public drama. It unfolded with precision, reflecting the careful work that had been done behind the scenes. Authorities waited for the right moment, choosing a time when evidence was complete and the risk of interference was minimal. The goal was to secure everything connected to the case in one move. Early that day, the couple's routine was interrupted. Their home was entered legally, and the environment they had carefully maintained was transformed into an active investigation site. Computers, phones, and storage devices were collected. Paper files that once looked ordinary were now treated as critical evidence. Each item was cataloged and sealed, ensuring nothing was lost or altered. The couple appeared stunned. The confidence they had built over months disappeared instantly. There was no confusion about why this was happening. The presence of warrants made the situation clear. What they had believed was invisible had finally been exposed. News of the arrest spread quickly through the neighborhood. People who had passed them daily struggled to connect the image of quiet residents with the seriousness of the charges. The contrast was striking. The home that once blended into the street now stood out as a symbol of hidden wrongdoing. At the same time, authorities continued their work without distraction. Statements were documented. Digital data was secured. Financial trails were frozen to prevent further movement. Every step followed procedure, leaving no room for error. By the end of the day, the couple was in custody. Their private life, once shielded by routine and silence, was now fully visible under legal scrutiny. The careful plan they believed would protect them had instead guided investigators straight to the truth, and the next stage would determine how deeply their actions would be judged. The courtroom phase stripped away all remaining distance between the couple and the consequences of their actions. What had once felt like a distant possibility now became unavoidable reality. Proceedings moved forward methodically, focusing on evidence rather than emotion. Every claim was tested against verified records, leaving little room for interpretation. Financial documents formed the backbone of the case. Charts and timelines demonstrated how events unfolded, showing clear preparation, execution, and follow-through. The structure of the activity revealed intent, not desperation or confusion. Each piece fit into a larger pattern that could not be dismissed as coincidence. Digital evidence reinforced the narrative. Records showed consistent access points and repeated actions tied to the same devices. The data confirmed that both individuals were involved at every critical stage. Responsibility could not be shifted or divided. The actions were shared, planned, and sustained over time. Attempts to reduce the seriousness of the offense were undermined by the scope of the impact. Although no physical harm occurred, the abuse of trust affected systems designed to protect others. The court viewed this breach as significant, emphasizing that crimes built on deception weaken public confidence. Throughout the proceedings, the couple's earlier image worked against them. Their stable background and knowledge of formal processes suggested awareness rather than ignorance. This understanding removed any suggestion that they acted without realizing the consequences. As the case reached its conclusion, the weight of the evidence left little uncertainty. The findings were clear and supported by facts gathered over many months. Guilt was established not through assumption, but through detailed reconstruction of events. The verdict marked a turning point. What began as a quiet attempt to escape financial pressure ended under full legal exposure. Life after sentencing moved slowly and without comfort. The couple entered a reality they had never imagined, one defined by strict routines, limited choices, and constant reflection. The freedom they once took for granted was gone, replaced by days that felt identical and long. Time, which once seemed like an enemy pushing them toward bad decisions, now stretched endlessly ahead of them. Inside prison, there was nothing left to hide behind. Status, appearances, and carefully built images had no value. They were no longer professionals, homeowners, or respected members of a community. They were simply two people facing the outcome of their own choices. The silence they once preferred now became a reminder of everything they had lost. Outside, their absence left lasting damage. Family connections weakened. Friends distanced themselves. The house that once symbolized stability was no longer theirs. Financial recovery became impossible, as legal consequences followed them beyond the sentence itself. Even after release, their records would remain, closing doors before they could be opened. The case continued to circulate quietly in reports and discussions, not because it was violent, but because it was unsettling. It showed how easily normal life can hide serious wrongdoing. It reminded people that crime does not always look dangerous or dramatic. Sometimes it looks organized, calm, and responsible. Most importantly, the story served as a warning. Pressure does not justify deception. Shortcuts taken in fear often lead to longer punishment. The couple believed they were protecting their future, but every step they took only narrowed it. In the end, their story was not about money or systems. It was about choices. Choices made slowly, justified easily, and paid for heavily. What remained was a lesson written not in words, but in years lost, trust broken, and a life permanently changed by a decision that once seemed like the only way out.